Hi, this is Danny Doyle, and normally I do videos on video games, but I thought I would try something different. These are all of the MCU movies. I had to put them in order myself because the list had them in alphabetical order, which, ew, gross. But I thought a nice, quick, and easy video to make would be to make a tier list of them. Don't expect any scorching hot takes. I think most of my opinions on Marvel movies are pretty basic. As a disclaimer, I'm not going to be ranking any of the shitty TV shows or any of the non-MCU movies like Morbius or whatever. Morbius would obviously be S tier. We all know it's morbing time. But I felt like it's already way too many fucking superhero movies. Adding more to the pile just didn't seem like great. Also, this is just my opinion. If you disagree with me, you're wrong, because it's actually facts, not my opinion. You're wrong. No, if you disagree with me, it's fine. Let me know in the comments what you agree or disagree with. Is Marvel washed? Okay, maybe this is the hot take. I don't actually think Marvel is washed. I just think that, like, a lot of the fucking movies that they're putting out are mediocre now, as opposed to when they used to have a slower release schedule, and more often the movies would be at least baseline quality good. I don't know. I don't want to watch mediocre movies anymore. That's the other thing, is like some of these movies are the sort of things that I would settle for, you know, half a decade ago, but movies are really expensive now. And there's just so many being pumped out. I don't want to watch mediocre trash. But with all that out of the way, Iron Man 1 is a fine, functional action movie. I feel like it's a fine, functional action movie that is elevated a lot by the end credit scene. I remember when the fucking end credit scenes actually meant something, as opposed to like pulling comic book deep cut character number 17 and being like, hey, this guy will show up in 70 films. Maybe. It was nice and simple and to the point. You know, Nick Fury goes, I'd like to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative, whatever it's called, Avengers Initiative. And immediately kicked off the idea of like, oh, there's going to be other superhero movies linked to this one. And I think that brought up what was an otherwise serviceable movie to be sort of a cultural event. I mean, it was the start of cinematic universes as we know them. And the only successful one so far. Probably the only successful one ever. It really feels like lightning in a bottle, because even now, like, calling Marvel successful now feels like a stretch, because at this point, a lot of their movies feel, and we'll get to this with the later movies, but a lot of their movies feel like you have to do homework to watch them. And I don't want to do homework to watch, like, a B-grade action movie. And that's what Iron Man is. It's a B-grade action movie. You know, it's still enjoyable. It's a popcorn film. It's better than Hulk. I think Hulk was really, really hated, initially. I watched it and I was like, it's fine. It's not as good as, like, well, Iron Man was the one that came before it, but, like, it's not as good. I can see why they replaced the actor. It's kind of just like big monster fights another big monster, but it's fine. Like, it's just kind of action and nothing else. I didn't really care for the characters at all. There was a funny scene where he's like he got his blood in one of the soda bottles in the factory he's working in while he's laying low, and he's like rushing. It's sort of like an action scene to get the bottle before it gets shipped off, but then it does get shipped off and Stanley dies. I actually think that's kind of funny. Especially since, like, now later, canonically, all the Stanleys were the same person because of, like, he's an entity working for the Watchers. So, like, I mean, like, it is kind of funny that he's recalling all those stories, and I have to imagine he's like, and then that one time I drank a soda and fucking died. But ultimately, I feel like this is just sort of a C tier. It's definitely not the worst that Marvel can get. In fact, we're going to see very soon Marvel can get a lot worse very quickly. But it's just sort of whatever. It's very ignorable. Iron Man 2 sucked, though. It just felt like it wasted so much time with, like, the two villains who I don't give a shit about talking to each other. There was the running gag with, like, my bird, I need my bird. Iron Man was, like, even less likable than usual. I don't think Tony Stark is, like, the most likable character, but he's usually got some amount of charm, at least. Robert Downey Jr. is very charming, and I think when they try to make him have emotional and humanizing moments, they're usually successful, but in this one, they just weren't. He's just an asshole to everyone. And it's like, boo-hoo, I'm depressed. Go fuck yourself. This is also when they introduced Black Widow and the whole, like, you know, Scarlett Johansson's not a great person. There's, like, the racism and the transphobia and stuff, but, at the same time, the way that the MCU treated her and her character with, like, the weird misogyny, this was the root cause of that, and I don't like that either. I don't think Iron Man 2 is quite bad. Actually, is it? No, it's not bad enough to be an F tier, but I do think it's a D tier movie. Thor is also really boring. So it starts out with, like, a cool action scene fight, right? With, like, Thor fighting frost giants and stuff. But then when he gets banished to Earth, the plot just grinds to a halt for a chemistry-less romance with Natalie Portman. And, like, I know that, like, a lot of people, especially when the fourth one came out, right? And they put, like, the cancer plot and everything in. I've heard, like, oh, well, you know, a lot of people have a personal experience with cancer, but I don't know. I don't like their romance. They have no chemistry. It felt incredibly forced, and it just took away from the two most entertaining parts of the movie, which are the action scenes, which are actually quite nice, and Loki. Like, so they made Loki the villain, but he's hardly on screen. Like, he's definitely the most likable part of the movie, but he's just not there. They fucking have, instead of a fight scene with Loki, he fights a giant robot on Earth. It's awful. This is worse than Iron Man 2. Maybe that's my hot take. Thor 1 was not good. I think it's remembered more fondly because, like, the first pre-Avengers movies sort of started it off, and we had lower standards, but I don't really like Thor 1. I do really like Captain America, though. I know that it's, like, you know, American exceptionalism war movie, but there's something about the combination of a war movie period piece fighting the Nazis and a superhero movie that really does it for me. I thought it was very fun. I actually liked the chemistry between the romantic leads. They felt, like, believable that they would be into each other and whatnot. The tier list has now... I didn't realize the movie posters are too tall. It's bloating the tier list. I'll have to fix that. Give me a second. Okay, I am back. Sorry about that. But yeah, chemistry between the romantic leads was good. Steve Rogers was a character that's really fun to root for. And I think consistently is a character who's fun to root for. I think he is... I know, you know, Iron Man is sort of meant to be the face of the MCU franchise, but personally, I enjoyed Steve Rogers more than Tony Stark. I like Captain America. He's like, you know, goody two-shoes or whatever, but I don't know. There's just something about rooting for a goody two-shoes. Yeah, I liked it. Adjusting that real quick because it was off-center. I thought all the side characters were fun. I liked the drill sergeant. I liked the little, like, subplot where they're like, oh, well, the scientist is dead, so we can't make you a soldier now. So instead, we're gonna have you do the entertainment stuff. I liked the first big fight scene where he goes and he rescues the prisoners of war. Yeah, the only thing that, like, is a little bit silly is, and this is more like comic bookification stuff, but, like, Nazis and Hydra, and I thought some of that was a little bit silly. The Tesseract just being, like, a generic plot element thing. I mean, certainly movies have done worse than that, but, I mean, hey, the easiest way to make me hate your villain is make them a Nazi, but Personally, I prefer when the villains are sympathetic, and you kind of can't have that in a World War II period piece, so it's fine. Avengers itself, that is an A-tier movie, I think, as well. I think Avengers is a incredibly serviceable action movie that is elevated significantly by the fact that it doesn't have to spend any time setting up the characters to make you care about them, and the fact that it sort of was the culmination of all of these movies and was an event. Like, going back to it, it's definitely not the best movie, but I think for what it sort of represented culturally, the big swing that they were going for, they really succeeded. There's some stuff I don't love. Hawkeye and Black Widow spend, like, way too much time on screen. I don't care about them. Show me the actual superheroes. I don't care about the fucking Hawkeye mind control plot thing, but I liked how they all had conflict with each other and sort of resolving that. The Coulson death was the Coulson death, and then, like, the ambiguity about his letter and whatnot. Bringing back Loki was, of course, a very good choice for villain, and then the big set piece fight in New York was cool and fun, and there's a reason that they revisited it. It was cool and fun. Very basic, but again, elevated by the fact that it just didn't have to do the legwork that action movies often do. You already care about the characters, let's just have fun for 90 minutes, or I think it's 90 minutes, it might be longer than that. Let's have fun for however long the movie is. Iron Man 3, I actually recently rewatched it because I was talking to my wife, and she said Iron Man 3 was trash, and I remembered really liking Iron Man 3, but the first time I watched Iron Man 3, I was on a date with someone who I'd been, like, crushing on for over a year, so I was like, you know what? That's actually probably a good point. My memory is probably, like, elevated by the fact that I was happy to be on the date. So I rewatched it, and my wife was right. It was not as good as I remembered, but I still think it's probably the strongest of the Iron Man trilogy. I thought that the way that they handled Tony's PTSD and made, like, a more grounded story was really cool. I liked the action scenes that he had to do without the suit and just sort of use smarts and MacGyver things and whatnot. I enjoyed that. I thought both of the villains were really interesting. Like, I liked, what's his name? The Mandarin. I liked the Mandarin and sort of the twist with him being, I think I forget what the actor's name in universe was, but the actor, him just being an actor was funny. And then I thought that the motivation behind Aldrich Killian, even though he's, like, ultimately kind of a boring villain, I thought he was cool. This was also, so if they had stuck with, like, retiring Iron Man, I think it would have been more impactful. Going back and watching it and knowing that, well, they just completely undo the ending because they want to keep having Iron Man, kind of made the conclusion feel like, oh, well, this isn't actually the conclusion to Tony Stark's plotline, like, that comes in Avengers Endgame. But this is probably the most likable, for me at least, the most likable that Tony has been outside of specifically Avengers Endgame. Endgame and Infinity War. I forget the flip-flop, the two-parter, you know what I mean. I felt that him getting, like, you know, he's grappling with the PTSD and still being kind of a piece of shit and then getting humbled, and I actually liked spending so much time with him, which is not something that I would say about him in the other movies, especially not 2, like, fuck Iron Man 2. And then we have Thor in the Dark World, called such because the fucking lighting text went home. I can't see what's going on, but honestly, that's a relief, because I don't want to see what's going on, because this movie is so trash. I don't know what there is to say about Thor the Dark World that hasn't been said about Thor the Dark World. Like, this is, like I said, this is not a list that's gonna have hot takes. This is the coldest take ever. Maybe people wouldn't be as harsh as I am, but I do think that Thor the Dark World is very bad. The villain is just, like, boring dark elf, who cares? There's so many scenes that are shot with incredibly poor lighting. I had to turn subtitles on to even understand what people were saying half the time. Just so garbage. Once again, they spend way too much time on the chemistry-less romance between Thor and Natalie Portman. And when they do get around to the action scenes are not particularly fun either. This is just a really bad movie. I rewatched it in preparation for this list because I was like, I don't remember much about Thor in the Dark World. And I fucking had to turn it off halfway through because I was just not enjoying it. And I can't even remember. There was one funny scene at the beginning that's like Natalie Portman is on a date with the actor from IT Crowd. And I'm pretty sure the only reason I found it funny is, oh, that's the actor from the IT Crowd. I think the IT Crowd is funny. Therefore, this scene must be funny. Because I don't remember any of the jokes. They probably weren't funny. God, fuck this movie. Alright, next is Captain America and the Winter Soldier. And like I said, I like Steve Rogers. I like following him. I thought that this was a very fun spy thriller. The whole, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. being Hydra thing and sort of taking them down while on the run led to some really exciting moments. The Winter Soldier himself, I kind of find boring, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like, maybe it's the Fire Emblem fan in me, but just there's too many brainwashing plots. I think more impactful than in the movie itself is what the movie did sort of rippling across the quote-unquote cinematic universe. Like, the complete delusion of S.H.I.E.L.D. affected future movies, and then also the television show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which I was really into at the time that this came out, went from being like a boring episodic Monster of the Week show to a much more interesting serialized show that separated itself from the larger MCU, I think for the better. And so, like, I think it's hard to separate the positive feelings I have with, like, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. becoming not shit from the movie that kind of forced that by getting rid of S.H.I.E.L.D. as an institution. But ultimately, I think the most damning thing about this is, similarly to Thor the Dark World, I just don't remember too much from it beyond the finale being they're going to turn all the helicarriers into, like, gun elimination, like, eliminate all the dissidents mode, which is a very silly bad guy plan. Bringing back Hydra, like I say, in the first Captain America, it's hard to have a sympathetic villain if your villains are Nazis, and I prefer when the villains are sympathetic, but at the very least, like, while they're not sympathetic, they do have realistic, like, motivations, and their motivation is just, like, bigotry, and it's nice to see Cap punch some bigots. I'm gonna go here. Probably better than the first Iron Man, but worse than the third one. I could have my mind changed about this. I feel like I probably should rewatch this, and maybe that would change its ranking, because it's been a while since I've seen this. But I did recently do a Guardians rewatch, the entire trilogy. Well, so rewatch of 1 and 2, I saw 3 for the first time last month, and it reaffirmed that Guardians of the Galaxy is the best thing to ever come out of the MCU. Rather than being like a by-the-numbers, boring action movie like everything that came before it, they got really wacky with it. They made it a sort of space opera with silly aliens and silly creatures and a likable cast. All 5 of the fucking Guardians are incredibly lovable, and they are elevated by their chemistry and relationships with each other. And, like, I say that as someone who hates Chris Pratt. Like, I do not like Chris Pratt as a person, but holy shit, his performance peak makes me actually care about Star-Lord. I actually care about all of the Guardians. I think that this is definitely an S tier. I don't know if this is, I guess we'll get to the other Guardians movies to compare them to each other. I like that this sort of sets the groundwork for Guardians 2, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I like that it's not afraid to have fun. Like, this is a very fun movie, whereas other movies, like, they're quippy, but this one is legitimately fun. I actually find myself laughing at jokes that I've seen multiple times, because it's fun, and it comes from the character dynamics, the chemistry they have with each other. The fact that you can actually care about these people as well. And they make a fucking raccoon and a fucking I take everything literally alien. Actually, these deep emotional characters who throughout the course of the series, I cry about things that happen to a fucking Bradley Cooper cartoon raccoon or a Mr. Literal sort of, I know a lot of people see autism in him. I personally don't, but maybe that's because, like, I don't know, my autism doesn't manifest with taking everything literally, whereas, like, nothing would go over my head. My reflexes are too, oh my, it's so good. This movie is so good. If you haven't seen Guardians, watch Guardians. Watch the whole trilogy. It's phenomenal. You don't have to watch Marvel. Like, you don't have to see the MCU stuff to understand Guardians. Guardians it stands on its own. It's really good. Is Avengers and Age of Ultron an F-tier movie? I kind of want to put it there out of spite. It's like trying to recapture the fucking magic of Avengers 1, but completely unfun. Especially coming right after Guardians, where you've got an ensemble cast where everyone has chemistry with each other and I care about everyone. Nobody in Age of Ultron has any chemistry with each other, especially not fucking Hulk and Black Widow, who they're supposed to make you, like, have you invested in this quote-unquote tragic romance where they break up because Black Widow reveals that actually she's more of a monster than Hulk because she's infertile? Get the fuck out of here, Joss Whedon, you misogynistic prick. This is also where I think the quipification sort of really took off. Like, Avengers 1 was very quippy, but it felt more contained. Avengers Age of Ultron, every fucking line is a goddamn quip. We cannot take a single moment seriously. Ultron is not an interesting villain. He's fucking obnoxious Pinocchio bullshit. This movie is so trash. It's in addition to the lack of chemistry and the fucking, like, offensive misogyny and the fucking all of that stuff, it's just so boring. Like, nothing exciting or fun or entertaining happens. That's just so fucking boring. Like, when I'm not rolling my eyes because I'm angry, I'm asleep. This movie, it's probably not actually worse than Thor: The Dark World. I want to put it below that because of spite, but, like, it's probably not actually worse, but it's so bad. And it feels so bad coming from, like, I was so hyped, like, Avengers was great, and then we showed the Guardians, we can do even more, like, awesome ensemble stuff, and then it's just like, who cares? Like, wow, Tony and Cap don't get along, oh, we got party, oh, Captain America tries to lift a hammer, who fucking cares? Everything that this movie tries to do is done better in either Avengers 1 or the 3 and 4 duology, whatever you want to call it. It's so bad. It's so bad. This might be my most controversial take, though. I'm actually a really big fan of Ant-Man. Specifically the first Ant-Man. And I know that, like, there was the director change partway through, and a lot of his sort of DNA held in the first Ant-Man, but similar to Guardians, this was a movie that felt very funny. I liked that it was much smaller scale. Obviously they leaned into that as, like, a pun with, like, ants. It's a small scale adventure. But I did appreciate that after doing, like, saving the universe, team up, entire, like, complete dynamic change or whatever, they're like, well, what if we have a C-list superhero just do a heist? And heist movies are very fun. There's some, like, you know, plot holes or whatever in terms of, like, Hank Pym and Pym particles and whatever, but who cares? Like, it's just a fun little heist movie, and I enjoyed that aspect of it. I thought that his friends, the two friends who sort of helped him out, the side characters, I thought they were very funny. I liked the leaning into this. I didn't think that the two actors, like, the romantic leads, had much chemistry, but I also felt like they weren't supposed to. Like, she fall for him in this movie. They sort of like made that, it felt like that was maybe a change last minute when they changed directors to be like, well, we got a male and female lead, they gotta fucking do the sex. We gotta do sex, set up sex for them. Sex. Cause you know, that's where Hollywood directors, they fucking do that shit. I maybe this is a fucking S tier movie. I really liked Ant-Man 1. Yeah, I really liked it. I appreciated leading into a much smaller scale. And I appreciated the humor. And I thought the villain was also, like, weirdly entertaining. It's the guy from House of Cards. I haven't seen him in anything but House of Cards and Ant-Man. And, like, he's fucking goofy while being intimidating. It's very silly. This is a movie that's very silly. And perhaps some of that silliness is not intentional. Much of it clearly is. But some of it probably isn't. But I think that even the unintentional sillies, like, adds to it. Civil War's kind of trash, right? Like, it's not as bad as Age of Ultron. But Civil War's kind of trash, right? Can we all, like, we're far enough removed that we can agree. The best part of Civil War was T'Challa. And similar to, like, Loki being the best part of Thor 1 and he's never on screen, T'Challa is the best part of Civil War, by far, like, far and away. And he's hardly in the movie, and instead we just have, like, Captain America and Tony Stark mad at each other for the stupidest reasons. It feels like a really forced conflict. And not only that, it feels like there's no stakes. Like, this is supposed to be the movie where the superheroes that have all previously been allies with each other, suddenly they're turned against each other because of their ideals. This didn't feel like people standing up for their ideals. In fact, Tony siding with big government as opposed to Captain America siding with independence almost feels flip-flopped from each other. Like, Cap sides with independence because, and I know Captain America's not supposed to be, like, fully, you know, rah America, right? Like, it's not unrealistic for him to be like, well, I'm not gonna side for the big government or whatever. But the big thing is just because of Winter Soldier, right? Because Winter Soldier got, like, reactivated in order to do a crime or something, and T'Challa wants to kill him. And Tony's just like, well, we gotta have Tony on the opposite side from Captain America. So now the man who has been characterized as fucking hating government interference is gonna suddenly decide, out of nowhere, I gotta side with the government. And then they just sort of line up the heroes based on, well, this one likes Tony Stark, so he sides with Tony, and this one likes Steve Rogers, so he sides with Steve. And it's just like, why is it like this? Why is it like this? It makes no fucking sense. Not only that, but again, even within the movie itself, it feels like there's no stakes. Like, you're supposed to have friends fighting each other, and they have quips with each other. Like, it's a fucking silly play fight rather than actual high drama of our ideals have us opposed. Fucking Radiant Dawn did a better job of making our ideals have us opposed than Captain America's Civil War did. And Radiant Dawn has a horrible story. Fucking, I guess they tried to make it, like, mean something because Rhodey got injured, but even that didn't stick! He's not injured anymore! This movie's so bad. This is worse than Thor 1. This is worse than Thor 1. No, it's not, because T'Challa's in it. A fucking begrudging C tier exclusively because of the Black Panther content. Yeah. Arguably, he's better in this than in Black Panther. He's kind of just, like, boring because he has to be the main character. And I feel like most of these superhero movies have to have the main character be the same exact person. Like, they're all the same guy. Doctor Strange is Tony Stark. Maybe that's why I like Steve Rogers so much, as he actually stands out as different from, like, I'm Quips McGee, the superhero, which is all the rest of them. But, like, T'Challa, when he's not the main character, gets to actually do stuff and be motivated and, like, have these complex feelings around his father's death and his place replacing him in the legacy and whatnot. And then, like, when I'll talk about it when we get to Black Panther, but he's kind of just like, the Marvel guy in that movie. Speaking of the Marvel guy, Doctor Strange was clearly really trying hard to make the next Tony Stark. Like, they knew they wouldn't have Robert Downey Jr. forever, although recent news events would say they maybe do. But they were like, well, what if we make someone else who's snarky and an asshole? And it's Doctor Strange, and he's gonna be the new main character of the MCU. And, like, that clearly didn't work, because Doctor Strange 2 was awful, and then they just sort of abandoned that. But for a while, they had him, like, constantly having cameos in other Marvel movies, and I think they really wanted him to be the new main character. Like, Tony Stark was the main character, but he was on the way out, so we gotta make a replacement, and it's gonna be Doctor Strange. But then it just, like, it wasn't. The effects were really cool, though. Like, I don't like the fucking whitewashing of the mentor. The elder, I forget her name. The Ancient. I think her name's the Ancient. I don't like the whitewashing of her. But other than that, the visual effects were really cool. This was kind of just like Iron Man, but now they have a significantly higher budget. So I think it's just like, it ends up like here. Better. It's Iron Man again, but like better budget. And also the conclusion was really cool. Like, I really liked the way that he outsmarted Dormammu. I thought that was neat. It's kind of boring when the villain is just, like, generic evil because generic evil, but, like, whatever. It's cool. Guardians 2 is the best film that Marvel has ever put out. This film, it is really hard to describe. If you haven't seen Guardians 2, it manages to perfectly balance the very silly, fun, goofy stuff from Guardians 1, while drawing on the emotional moments that were there in the first Guardians, but, like, further exaggerating them. And, like, everyone is going through some shit. Everyone is having mental health problems all the time. The most boring of them is Star-Lord and, like, his daddy issues, and then learning that, like, daddy killed mommy with cancer. But Rocket and the whole, like Rocket and Nandu and I know you because you're me, and then Nandu, like, sacrificing himself at the end to save Peter. There's so many, like, all of the lines in this, they feel kind of cheesy to say, like, oh my god, I got emotional at I don't use my head, I use my heart, or, you know, I got emotional at he might be your father, but I'm your daddy, or, you know, the various things like that, right? But I think that the movie having the balls to have all of these genuine movies that are not genuine movies, genuine moments that the more cynical audience members will point at and be like, ew, that's for kids, that's baby Disney Channel stuff. Why are you being all Disney Channel and emotional and power of friendship? And like the other Marvel movies are fucking afraid to have any genuine moments. They fill it with fucking quips. And Guardians, despite being, again, one of the funniest and goofiest movies that Marvel has put out, is not afraid to be like, no, we're going to be genuine for this scene. We're going to be like, these characters have emotions. They're depressed. They're fucking daddy issues. They fucking, like, push people away with anger and being shitty. And this is also where the Nebula stuff, like Nebula Redemption, they sort of hinted at it at the end of Guardians 1, but this is where it comes sort of in full swing and eventually makes Nebula one of the Guardians. And I thought that was done really well. The fucking, like, the whole coming from this abusive family thing and the way that they reacted to the different forms of abuse that they got differently. I'm tearing up just thinking about all of this stuff because this is such a good movie. Do not watch this movie if you want to have a good time. Like, you will come away feeling probably more depressed than you went in. It has, even though their victory, it feels like a downer ending, and not just because a character died. Like, God, it's so good though. It's so good though. Like, all of the characters are broken. But it's okay because they have each other. There's the scene with Mandus where, oh my god, the scene with, the scene where my two favorite neurodivergent aliens sorry about that, cat interruption. So like I was saying, there's that scene where Mantis and Drax are hanging out together, and it's like a basically dialogue-less scene, and Mantis just like feels Drax's pain that he doesn't express because he doesn't emote. Because they really leaned into that, like, oh, autistic people thought that this literalism was representation? Well, we're gonna make him autistic now. And sort of she breaks down crying as an empath while he's just sitting there straight-faced in pain thinking about his family. There's the fucking, God, this movie is so goddamn good. Also, since I've been complaining about chemistry-less romances, can I talk about how fucking bold it was to give Drax and Mantis some of the best on-screen chemistry in the MCU and be like, no, they're explicitly not going to be romantically interested in each other. These are just incredibly good friends. This movie is so fucking good. This movie is... Yeah, fucking watch Guardians 2 if you haven't. Again, this is not a hot take. I don't think people will be like, oh my god, Danny likes Guardians 2. That's considered the trash movie. But, you know, sometimes things are popular because they're good. I didn't really like Spider-Man Homecoming. On first watch through, I thought this was trash. I did recently rewatch the Spider-Man trilogy, the MCU Spider-Man trilogy, and my opinion on it has gone up. I do think it has some really cool stuff. I think Tom Holland is probably the best Peter Parker we've ever had. And I say that as someone who fucking loves the Sam Raimi trilogy, right? But I do think Tom Holland makes a very good Peter Parker. He doesn't kill anyone, and in fact, the final sort of like action scene is him stopping Vulture from dying because Peter Parker is supposed to care about life. He's sort of like Marvel's Batman in that way. You know, a lot of superheroes don't kill people, but they don't... It's not as core to them as Peter Parker. Because that sort of random act of violence and death was a core part of his origin story. That being said, like, aside from that element, like, Peter Parker's in two other better movies. It's kind of just, like, generic action film with a really good lead. Probably, like, here, I guess? Yeah. Yeah, I think it's better than Doctor Strange. It might be worse than Doctor Strange. So maybe this is higher than I expected to put it, but I do think that it's... Maybe Iron Man is C tier. No, I think this is right. Like I said, when I rewatched it, I enjoyed it more than on the first watch through, but it is still, at the end of the day, kind of just a generic action movie with likable characters. Thor Ragnarok is very good. It is the only good Thor movie. And it is an incredibly good movie. I think I like it more than Ant-Man. I think this is also an S-tier movie. This captures that same energy that Guardians has. It doesn't have the heartfelt stuff, which does sort of like bring it short. But it's goofy and zany and fun. It's another space opera. Like, maybe I just don't like superhero movies, and instead I like space operas. But, like, this is just, they're on an alien planet. They're trying to break out of the alien planet. There's a fun sort of gladiator fight. You get to see this. So, fucking, we had a movie built around the superheroes fighting each other. And this movie just incidentally has that and does it so much better than in the entirety of Civil War. I really like Jeff Goldblum's performance as the villain. I went in as blind as possible. I knew about Hulk, but I didn't know anything else. So I was really pleased to see that, like, Hera was kind of just sidelined. I guess she wasn't sidelined. She did take up a big chunk of the movie. I did find that the Hera stuff on Asgard was actually kind of boring. And when I think about it, that was at least a third of the movie. They would cut back and be like, now Hera's doing this. And the Asgard Resistance, who you don't give a shit about, is doing this. But I liked the conclusion of defeating Hera, how, like, Ragnarok, they had to bring Ragnarok themselves. That was kind of a cool subversion. I didn't care about that fucking, I don't even remember his name, the guy with the submachine guns. I did not give a shit about him. He's supposed to be, like, he goes through this big, long redemption arc, and I can't even remember his name because I do not care. Maybe Ant-Man's more fun than Ragnarok. Yeah, I think that's the hot take. That's the one that people are gonna cancel me for. A tier, right? Like, okay, so T'Challa's kind of boring. Unfortunately, he shifted from the very cool character who elevated Civil War from the trash fire that it is into actually decent to watch, into just being boring Marvel superhero, man. He doesn't quip as much as other Marvel superheroes, so that, like, does make him stand out. But ultimately, I think he's the least interesting character, or at least the least interesting main character. I like his sister, I like his girlfriend, and then, of course, the reason that the movie is as highly rated as it is, Killmonger, right? Like, the best villain that MCU has ever had. They've been trying to make a sympathetic villain who is as sympathetic as him, and they haven't been able to, because they just accidentally tapped into something that, like, I don't think they wanted to make the social commentary that they did. Because, you know, Disney, big corporation, racism, all that stuff. But I'm so glad that they did, because Killmonger, like, he's right? He's right. Killmonger is correct. He, like, you could argue he goes about things the wrong way or whatever, but, like, Killmonger is right. And I think that having an antagonist who just is right, but, like, maybe misguided, it adds so much. He's also just incredibly charming. And fucking so many raw lines, elevated by his performance, by the way. Fucking, when he's defeated, you know, throw me in the water, I will join my ancestors who knew that it'd be better to die than live in bondage, right? This movie is so good. This movie is so good, and it's basically all because of Killmonger. Otherwise, it's just kind of a whatever action movie, but just one of the best villains we've had. And sometimes that's enough. Avengers Endgame recaptured the magic that Avengers 1 did, but on a much larger scale, and was much more enjoyable as a result. It managed to hook in, like, most of the characters from the MCU, give everyone enough screen time that nobody felt like just a cameo, and give a lot of characters, like, fulfilling arcs throughout the course of the story. There's a lot of moments that feel like, oh, this is a very impactful moment for these characters, like Star-Lord killing Gamora, but then not actually, because of the Bubbles thing. Like, that was a huge fucking moment for them, and they just, like, put it in this ensemble video that then also had stuff like, oh, Spider-Man goes to the big leagues now, and then Tony Stark has to cuddle him as he dies. There's stuff like, you know, I see 10 million possibilities, and there's only one where we could win. Characters get emotional, characters get heated. They even, like, sneak in a little, like, heroes versus heroes action when both sides think that they're fighting for Thanos, or fighting against Thanos. There's obviously, like, the big finale, the battle on Wakanda, that was really cool. The only negative thing about this is, like, so many movies trying to force a fucking chemistry-less het romance. They had to do it again with fucking Wanda and Vision, that then became a fucking catalyst for the rest of the, like, that romance that comes out of nowhere, and there's no goddamn chemistry, somehow has rippling implications throughout the entirety of Phase fucking 4. Like, it's WandaVision, it's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, they apparently made a fucking Agatha Harkness show. Why are you centering so much on the least interesting of your boring chemistry-less romances? But, like, I'm focusing on the negatives. The positives, this movie is non-stop fun to watch. It's almost entirely action, and yet at the same time they manage to have breaks, to have like character beats. The quips are actually fun. Like, it doesn't feel over-quipified like many of the other modern Marvel movies do. There's no like, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. Aw, damn, I hope you packed ibuprofen. That sort of shit. But at the same time, there are some genuinely entertaining quips. Especially when it comes to, like, they're contained within the action scenes, which is where they should be. But they don't interrupt the action scenes. They're not non-stop. It's good. This movie's good. I don't need to say this movie's good. People agree that this movie is good. But this movie is good. This movie is fun. This movie is part of why Civil War sucks, because there's no consequences to Civil War. Like, can you imagine if there was actually some fallout? I'm so mad. I'm so mad about Civil War. It's so stinky. Ant-Man and the Wasp. I remember enjoying Ant-Man and the Wasp, but every time I think about going back to it, I'm like, I'd probably like it less. It focuses more on the romance. It's much more like, it kind of feels like the prototype for modern Marvel, with like, we're going larger scale. Everything has to be larger scale. They even make him big. They lean into that with the joke. They try to make it a small scale adventure, but like, it isn't, because they're going into the fucking quantum realm, right? And there's quips, and there's forced romance, and it's just not memorable. Probably like here, I guess. It might go lower if I rewatched it, but I also, the fact that I don't want to rewatch it tells me it should probably be in D tier. I probably have like suppressed negative emotions around Ant-Man and the Wasp. Captain Marvel's fine. Captain Marvel, like, there was so much fucking controversy around this movie. So there was like the backlash because like, it's woman, and then there was the backlash to the backlash of like, oh my god, girl power, it's the best mover ever. This movie is like just a perfectly generic Marvel superhero movie. Like there? Maybe there? I don't fucking know. Like, it's got some like, oh ho, 90s nostalgia, but then it also, it's more indicative of modern Marvel with like, its inability to take anything seriously. Oh, actually, I think it is C tier. Because it's not able to take anything fucking seriously. You gotta put quips in everything. Any emotional moment has to be undercut by like, oh, but what if we made a funny joke? What if Nick Fury's eye got fucking scratched by a cat and aliens? I did like the twist of like, the Skrull not actually being the bad guys. That was kind of cool. Apparently they undercut that. They made the Skrull evil again in like Secret War or something. I don't fucking care about modern Marvel. I don't. But yeah, it's just like a very generic action movie. Oh, you know what? Actually, it has like the bullshit military propaganda. You're going down into below Civil War. Sorry, Miss Marvel. It's really hard to talk about Endgame in isolation from Infinity War. But I do think I like it better than Infinity War. We had this big, grand finale. And then we go smaller scale. We take, like, the original Avengers and a couple of extra people. We send them on a heist movie. You know how I feel about a heist movie. I love a heist movie. It's a time heist movie. Just to grab the different gems. I thought that this was a really good conclusion to both Steve Rogers and Tony Stark's character arcs. I liked them going back in time and then going back again, and Tony gets to meet his dad, and that scene always makes me tear up even though it's kind of generic. And then, Steve sees Peggy back in time, and then that ultimately lets him decide, you know what, I've actually earned a quiet life, a retired life, right? I liked that. I liked Tony's sacrifice. I liked the idea of, like, him being reluctant to help because he doesn't want to lose his kid. I like that they made some of the deaths stick. I was afraid at the end of it. I was actually kind of upset about the Gamora coming back because I was afraid they weren't going to make that death stick. But they ultimately did in Guardians 3, and I liked that choice. I think that was a good choice. But yeah, it's hard to separate Endgame from Infinity War. Like, I feel like they are two halves of a whole. But I liked it. I liked it a lot. Spider-Man Far From Home is the movie that sold me on Tom Holland as a Peter Parker. It feels like the Iron Man 3 of Spider-Man. Like, we skipped 2, which is good because it's shit, and then we took the instance where we're gonna power him down, we're gonna put him, like, against the world without, he still has spider powers, but he doesn't have the Stark Tech anymore. He's fighting against the villain, right, is in S.H.I.E.L.D. He's backed by Nick Fury. So it feels like a more scrappy underdog story. They also have, they start the romance between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and I think that this is one of those romances that the actors actually have chemistry, probably partially because they started dating in real life. I liked Mysterio in this, both his motivation, although it is kind of eye-rolling of, like, how many supervillains did you create, Tony Stark? And also his performance was really good. This was also, I think, Happy's best performance. Happy is a character who's, like, in the background of a bunch of movies. But here, with him sort of helping Peter, when Peter's, like, down and out, and the sort of, oh, what are you looking at? Oh, I see him, like, that sort of thing. I think this was a really good performance for him. This was probably an A-tier movie. I really like Tom Holland as Peter Parker. Yeah, I think top of A-tier, honestly. I think top of A-tier. On a, like, non-nostalgia baiting level, probably the strongest of the 3 Spider-Man films, but I'm not immune to nostalgia bait. This movie... So it's like Captain Marvel, in that it's just a generic-y superhero movie. I don't know, I just didn't find it all that entertaining. I think the most damning thing is, like, what do I fucking say about this movie? Maybe it's partially I don't like Scarlett Johansson as a person. But it's just, like, I guess it is kind of, like, terrifying. It is kind of terrifying, the whole, like, brain control, convincing the soldiers to kill themselves through, like, mind control thing. There was the, like, hypnosis pig scene that went on for way too long, and, like, I don't like animal cruelty, so that was kind of a point down. I didn't find the characters all that likable, and they're making a fucking movie around her family, the Thunderbolts, so, like, what the fuck is that gonna be? But yeah, I didn't care for this. I didn't care for this at all. It's just bad. I don't like it. Shang-Chi and the Rings of Power, I actually really liked. This felt like a fun kung fu movie. A lot of the action scenes were really good. The bus scene sort of gets highlighted a bunch, but I also liked the fight on the skyscraper when they're, like, going down the skyscraper. I guess a lot of the best action was very front-loaded. The second half of the movie, I didn't care for as much. I don't remember much of the second half. I know they brought back the Mandarin, and that was cool to see him come back. Yeah, first half of the movie really, really strong. Second half of the movie, incredibly bland and forgettable. Probably, like, here? Yeah, that seems good. Speaking of bland and forgettable, I remember when I saw this movie, I was like, everyone is insulting this, but this is actually, like, just a very generic movie that they slapped the Marvel label on. And then I forgot all of the details of it within a week. And, like, that, I feel like that says enough. This is, like, F tier, right? I don't know. I know that they made, like, a giant, like, a giant emerged from the earth, right? And then nobody comments on it because nobody liked Eternals. This movie was kind of boring. It also, like, it was an ensemble movie, but half of the time they're not with each other. And most of them don't have chemistry with each other. And I also just, there were too many. Like, there were too many characters all introduced at once, so I can't care about any of them. Yeah, this movie kind of sucks. You know, I said Spider-Man 2 is probably the best without nostalgia bait, but that's probably not even true. I think Far From Home had some really great moments, even ignoring the Sam Raimi nostalgia bait. I have no nostalgia for Andrew Garfield Spider-Man. I haven't seen the Andrew Garfield movies. But I did think he did a good job in this. I've heard that he was just directed badly in his original duology. I don't know if that's true or not, but, like, he played a good Peter Parker in this. Electro and Lizard were there. They were just sort of whatever. Doc Ock and especially Green Goblin were just, like, peak. I really liked the fucking... So, honestly, I really liked the through line of, like, hey, you know, this is a Peter Parker who really values life enough that he's willing to fight Doctor Strange to save the lives of the people who the previous Spider-Man movies just wantonly killed off. All 5 of them. And I like that he's challenged on that, because that's why his aunt dies, is because he didn't just send them back to die. Like, he loses someone he cares about because of that. I think that, the fate that he has of, like, being forgotten by everyone is a little bit too harsh. I remember at the time I was like, was this punishment for, like, Marvel and Tom Holland not getting along because Tom Holland constantly drops spoilers? Because it's, like, one of the darkest endings of any movie I've seen, let alone a fucking superhero movie. I've heard the argument that it, like, sort of lets him reboot and not be a mechanical Spider-Man, but I liked mechanical Spider-Man. I liked that he had the Stark Tech behind him. I thought that made him, like, kind of cool. It made him feel different from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. But ultimately, like, this was nostalgia bait done incredibly, incredibly well, and that alone probably elevates it to S tier. I really liked Far From Home. And it made me optimistic. After, like, a couple of stinkers post-Avengers, I was like, okay, this shows that Marvel still knows what they're doing. And then I went into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness excited. And I left incredibly... I want to put it down here because of spite. But it's better than, like, these. It's probably better than this. I fucking hated this movie, though. This is the movie that got me to stop watching Marvel movies. I stopped watching Marvel movies after fucking Doctor Strange. The plot was garbage. It felt like it was written by the D team. Like, it was constantly self-contradictory. And when I complained about it, I remember I complained about it on a Discord. And somebody replied, like, it would make more sense if you watched the What If TV show and if you watched the WandaVision TV show. You should have known you have to watch those before Doctor Strange the Multiverse of Madness. And I'm like, why the fuck do I need to do homework to watch Doctor Strange? I get that for the Avengers movies, you want to watch a bunch of movies leading up to it, because they're the events. But for Doctor Strange, I should only have to watch the previous Doctor Strange and maybe the Avengers movies. The Avengers movies feel like the sort of thing that, like, especially Endgame and Infinity War, had a bunch of dynamic shifts that I'm like, okay, you need to watch those, that's fine. You need to watch them to understand Spider-Man and Guardians and Thor and, you know, that's fine. But I don't want to have to watch 17 different TV shows. And this, like, that combined with just this movie kind of sucking, the effects weren't even entertaining. Like, that was the best part of Doctor Strange. And they were, like, the only good visual effects were already in the trailers, and they weren't as good as they were in Doctor Strange 1. There was also, like, the whole thing with the, oh, it's queer representation to have this character wear a pride pin because she killed her 2 lesbian moms by accident. Like, they show up, the unnamed lesbian moms show up in a single scene just to be killed off. Bury your gays is not good representation. Ask for better, you fucking imbeciles. This movie was very bad, and like I said, it's what stopped me watching Marvel movies for a while. I skipped Thor, I skipped Black Panther, I skipped Ant-Man, I skipped Guardians. I skipped all of these, actually, until recently. I was like, you know, I've heard Guardians 3 is actually good. I want to rewatch the Guardians trilogy. I rewatched the Spider-Man trilogy because I really liked those. And then I was like, I've heard Guardians 3 is actually good. I want to rewatch the Guardians trilogy so that I can watch 3, having freshly seen 1 and 2. And then someone told me, oh, well, you have to watch Thor: Love and Thunder to understand Guardians because it has the Guardians in it. And that was a fucking lie, and I killed that person because this movie sucked ass so much. Again, the worst part of the old Thor movies was the chemistry-less romance, which Ragnarok smartly dropped. And then Love and Thunder was like, what if we brought it back and made it the central fucking thesis of the movie is you just really fucking care about Natalie Portman and Thor ending up together. Cause like the villain is generic as shit. It's just like, oh, what if there was a guy who wanted to kill all the gods? That would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? No, it's not. It's boring and stupid, and the romance is boring and stupid, and the action scenes were not entertaining. The only cool thing about it was Mjolnir like splitting up like a shotgun in that first scene. But then they never did that again. Much like Dark World, there's a lot of like poorly lit scenes, especially they go into the black and white world. And it's just like you're asking for me not to be able to see stuff. And then, of course, it ends with... Okay, so they go to the Olympus, and the Olympus scene was the one part where I was like, oh, maybe they're doing something with this, because they introduce Zeus as some, like, big, imposing figure, and then immediately kill him off in one shot. And I was like, that's funny. They get it. They're undermining the whole, like, Marvel cinematic universe needs to constantly throw all these cool figures. That's cool. I love it. Oh, whoop, I hit a button and it scrolled down. I thought it was a very funny joke. And then, as if to be like, no, Danny, this is Thor: Love and Thunder. Nothing good happens here. They brought him back. Zeus didn't actually die. And a post-credit scene, he's like, Heracles, you will kill Thor so that they know to hate supervillains and they know that the gods are better than superheroes. And oh! And I'm just like, I don't fucking care. I don't fucking care about this goddamn, like, teaser cinematic universe homework bullshit. And so I haven't watched Wakanda Forever, and I haven't watched Ant-Man Quantumania, and I haven't watched The Marvels, but I did watch Guardians 3, and it was good. It was good. People were not wrong. I think it was the weakest of the Guardians trilogy. I think I liked it less than the Avengers Infinity duology, whatever you call that. But it was still really good. My biggest complaints, I think that it was really weird for them to have a movie focused around the relationship between Peter Quill and Rocket Raccoon and have the two of them share almost no screen time. In fact, the movie itself was supposed to be like Rocket-centric because it does like his backstory, and he spends most of the time in the coma remembering his backstory, which was very drawn out and very unentertaining. I know I love animals. I don't like seeing animals get hurt. I didn't like Black Widow because of the pig suffocation scene. In part because of that. You know, it was also kind of just shit. But an incredibly generic, there's cute animals on screen backstory, and they're in the lab and they're gonna die, is something I've seen 1.5 million times. And just having it incredibly drawn out, it made me care less rather than more. They were very cute, and I am prepared for all of the Tumblr think pieces about how the animals naming themselves is trans allegory. But ultimately, it just didn't work for me. I recently saw Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and the Maria stuff, because I thought like, oh, maybe I'm just jaded. But no, the Maria scenes. There's one Maria scene. Well, there's two technically, but there's one that's like the main one. And that accomplished everything that I think Rocket's backstory was trying to accomplish in a single scene so much better. So I'm not just jaded. I just didn't think that this worked well. I liked the running joke of the dog who was like, don't call me bad dog, call me good dog. And that was like the biggest conflict ever. I liked that they brought Gamora back and then they insisted over and over, like, no, this is a different person. We're not bringing the Gamora who died back to life. I thought that was cool. I liked, like, Peter not being able to accept that and then eventually just sort of getting it through his thick head. I really liked the Drax Mantis stuff. Honestly, I think Drax Mantis Nebula were like the best part of Guardians 3. And I liked that they all got paired with each other frequently. I thought that despite being a movie that's supposedly about Rocket and Quill, they had much better chemistry with each other than Peter and Rocket Raccoon did. Part of me, I was talking to my wife about this, but I wonder if, like, in 5 years, we're going to get some sort of expose about how Bradley Cooper and Chris Pratt really hated each other and they couldn't be in the same room with each other, because they have, like, 2 scenes together, and the movie's about their relationship. And I know that, like, Bradley Cooper's, like, a lib-left person, and Chris Pratt's got, like, an alt-right fucking militia brother, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's some beef between them, and that's why... Kind of like how, anyone who's a fan of the Fast movies knows that in modern Fast movies, The Rock and Vin Diesel, like, fucking hate each other. And so the plot, like, goes out of its way to separate them from each other as much as possible because they can't stand being in the same room. And I'm wondering if something similar happened in Guardians 3, because it feels so weird to me that they have a scene at the beginning where Peter is drunk and Rocket's, like, being an asshole to him. And then they have a scene together at the very end where Peter's like, I saved your life. And then Rocket's like, we need to save the kids. All of them, even the animals. And that's it. That's all that they share together. They have no, like, they really don't have chemistry. And it's supposed to be about, like, this is my best friend who I love, who I'm willing to risk everything for. And it doesn't communicate. But still really good. Still really good. Very fun. Very emotional. I like the Guardians movies. I like them. The last 3 movies are Deadpool. I've got to scroll now because the movie posters are too tall. But Deadpool and Wolverine was the one that is officially MCU, but I watched the other 2 Deadpool movies, so I thought I would rank all of them as well, just because I'm not gonna rank, like, look at this garbage, there's so many of them. The fucking didn't watch tier would be full to the brim, but I will rank these, especially because I watched all of them very recently for the first time. I saw Deadpool in February of last year, I saw Deadpool 2 in December of last year, and then Wolverine the next week. And these are movies that are going for very similar energy. The sort of, like, R-rated superhero. And in some ways, like, Deadpool itself is kind of a film that really coasts on shock value. And so I've heard people say the sequel is worse because it's not shocking. And to an extent, there are things that don't work in the sequel that worked in Deadpool 1. But ultimately, I think Deadpool 1 is probably a worse film, because I did like the, similar to Guardians, the sort of emotional through line of, like, Deadpool having to save that kid rather than let him get killed. I also just thought a lot of the humor was better in Deadpool 2 than Deadpool 1. I really liked the forming of the task force, the fucking doomed task force. I liked the Lucky Lady. I forget her name. The Lucky Lady, though, she was a very fun addition to the cast. Ultimately, I think, like, Deadpool probably bottom of B. Deadpool 2, like, not that much better than it, but a little bit. But the reason I bring them up and why I wanted to talk about them is I think Deadpool and Wolverine did what Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 did, but significantly better, to the point where I might even put it in S tier, actually. And I feel like because it's a movie that like sort of coasts on, oh my god, it's shocking and weird and Ryle Reynolds coded, it feels like the sort of thing where, because it's been so long since 1 and 2 came out, some of that like shock might just be nostalgia for the first two. It might ultimately be a weaker movie. But having watched all three of them in a row, I can say that while you would expect them to get worse over time as that sort of shock wears off, I think they genuinely get better. I think that there's a lot of very fun and funny moments in Deadpool and Wolverine. It does occasionally have that heartfelt stuff from Guardians, but the heartfelt stuff feels shallow. Like, you were actually the best Wolverine. Yeah, it has the emotional swell to sort of like make you tear up or whatever, but it's not the same. It's really not the same. Deadpool and Wolverine is more just the climax of fun. It's incredibly fun. It doesn't take itself seriously. It doesn't care about the fucking MCU homework. In fact, it sort of spits in the face of it. The premise is around, like, the universe being movies. There's fucking anger beings, which is, like, the main character of the movies. It's really fun and funny. They spend time with, like, people from canceled movie projects, with like Blade and Gambit and X-23, who I think is from Logan. I haven't seen Logan. I know, sue me. But yeah, I really enjoyed Deadpool and Wolverine. It sort of restored my faith in like certain corners of the Marvel universe. And I think that the way that I will approach the MCU is I will judge each movie based on, does that look like the sort of thing that I would actually enjoy, or does that look like it's just trying to be another fucking garbage Marvel movie? And if it's just trying to be a garbage Marvel movie, like anything C and below, I just fucking won't watch. But anything that looks like I would enjoy it, I'm not gonna watch the homework for it. Cause like, God, I did not need to watch Love and Thunder to understand Guardians 3. And I guarantee you, in fact, no, I don't have to guarantee you. I went back and I watched WandaVision and What If, and you know what? They added nothing to the fucking Doctor Strange movie. It pretends you need to do homework in order to make up for its shortcomings. Just make better movies. Just make better movies instead. Don't give me homework. Give me movies. I want to say a big thank you to my Patreons. Thank you Eris, Michael Kraus, Len, Gameboo, Karosa, Fyrant, Smaz Ruby, Zycron, Robin D, Lizard Bongwater, A Clever Username of Lies, Reflect, Andu, Theythom, Calamity Callie, Marin McLean, Christopher Bueno, YLO1, George Grenville the 7th PM, Jamie Collins, Mean Jojo, Thick Molder, Arvis, Tailored Muffin, Flo Ahay, Gabe the Green, Control Aegis, Roman Kormantic, Nick Knack Hammersmack, SUP, Caius Cole, Bell Wenska, Dysike, Ginger, Root Beer Pants, Queen Elizam, Aerith Emblem, Adele, and especially my Jakins, Justin Robinson, Autumn Kelsey, Kyle Madison, Elizabeth, and Julia Kyoto. Your support is what makes this channel possible, so thank you so much. There's a link to the Patreon below for anyone who's interested in donating to the channel, but please only do so if you can comfortably afford to do it. I don't want anyone going broke over Fire Emblem, or I guess in this case, the MCU. Regardless though, have a wonderful day. Stay safe, gamers.